The unprecedented act, Burkina Faso defies the old order. On August 18, 2025, before the sun had even risen over Ouagadougou, a political earthquake shook the continent. In an unprecedented move, Captain Ibrahim Traoré ordered the total expulsion of the United States Embassy from Burkina Faso. It wasn't just the ambassador, it was every staff member, every symbol, the entire diplomatic presence of one of the world's most powerful nations. Behind the embassy gates, the Burkinabe army formed a security cordon. Inside, American staff frantically packed. The Stars and Stripes, a flag that once flew proudly, was now being taken down. In Ouagadougou's central plaza, there was no fear, only a chorus of shouts. Sovereignty is not for sale. Traoré's words were clear. We are not just expelling a building. We are expelling the arrogance that has chained Africa for far too long. His words burned like fire, spreading across the Sahel and beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Was this madness or an act of courage? Can a poor nation choose dignity over international aid? And if it does, can it survive? This isn't just a news story. It's a tale of defiance, a head-on challenge to the old order. Inside the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood by a long oak table. Before him lay the latest U.S. report, an insult spread out on paper. Each paragraph was marked in red ink. His advisors watched him in tense silence as he turned page after page, his brow furrowed. "Listen to this," he said in a low, sharp voice. "The audacity. They have the gall to write this. The Burkinabe armed forces, alongside extremist groups. They dare to put our soldiers, the only shield between our villages and chaos, next to the murderers of our vende. This act of defiance raises profound questions. What are the true costs of sovereignty? And what does it take for a nation to reclaim its own narrative?" A dagger to the heart. The Minister of Defense shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Perhaps they don't understand our reality," he offered. Traoré slammed his palm on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Don't understand?" he roared. "More than 2 million of our citizens have been displaced since 2016. Did they not read the UN data from last year? 2,000 civilians died on our soil, and yet, from the safe halls of Washington, they dare to declare our defenders are the same as those who massacre children?" He fell silent for a moment, his gaze burning with rage, sweeping the room. What kind of arrogance writes such words, thousands of miles north in Washington? That same report, he knew, had been read with bureaucratic monotony by U.S. officials. For them, it was just another transaction. For Traoré, it was a dagger plunged into the heart of his nation. He called his spokesperson. "Read it to the people," he ordered. "Let every mother who has buried a child hear how America names them." That night, state television broadcast his indignation, word for word. "The United States claims our army violates human rights," the announcer declared. "Who gave them the authority to define our dignity?" In the barracks of Kaya, young soldiers listened with clenched fists. "So, is it true what the captain says?" one murmured bitterly. "They call us criminals?" Another replied sharply. "We bled at Jibo, we fought at Yalga, and they compare us to Al-Qaeda?" When the reports once again landed on Traoré's desk, he gathered his ministers. His voice filled the room like a war trumpet. "Every day, our fighters hold the line at Zom and Allen. They are the ones who prevent the jihadists from destroying the last schools we have left. And what does America see? Numbers on paper. They count the dead, but do they count the widows we leave behind? They speak of violations, but do they speak of martyrdom? Tell me, do they?" No one dared to answer. A nation reclaims its narrative. Only the whirring of the ceiling fan marked the passage of time. Traoré walked slowly through the room, his boots resounding against the tiled floor. "This isn't about legal documents," he declared. "This is about narrative. If they place us in the same category as terrorists, what story will be left of Burkina Faso? What story will our children inherit? Will we allow others to dictate our place, or will we claim it for ourselves?" Outside the palace walls, the streets began to hum. Protests swelled, and signs were hoisted high with phrases like, "Sovereignty is not for sale." But it was Traoré's voice that rose above it all. From the presidential balcony, he spoke directly to his people. "They say your soldiers are criminals," he thundered, "but I tell you they are guardians. They fall so that you may stand. Must we bow to distant capitals that do not know our wounds?" The crowd roared back in unison. "No! Inside the palace, an advisor shifted nervously. "But Captain, the United States controls aid. They fund our food, our medicine, our schools." Traoré cut him off without hesitation. "Aid without dignity is a chain. Better to starve in freedom than to eat bread in humiliation. Do you not understand? They want us to kneel, so their aid looks like grace. But we are not beggars. We are a nation." The silence that followed was as thick as the red soil of the Sahel. His ministers looked at one another, their faces a mixture of awe and trepidation. Traoré's words were bold, even defiant. Yet, who could deny their truth? On the morning of August 18, 2025, the air in Ouagadougou was heavy with tension. It wasn't the usual sounds of dawn that dominated the city, but the held-in breath of a capital that felt the weight of a historic decision. Along the boulevard leading to the U.S. Embassy, Burkinabe soldiers formed an impenetrable line. Their boots kicked up the Sahel dust with each determined step. Rifles were slung across their shoulders, their faces hardened. They knew this was no ordinary day. Behind the tall wrought iron gates, embassy staff hurried to pack documents, equipment, and personal belongings. The American flag hung motionless on its pole, as if it too knew its time there had ended. Under the scorching sun, their faces were pale. The diplomats didn't need words to understand the message. They were no longer welcome. Inside the presidential palace, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was meeting with his cabinet. His voice, sharp with conviction, echoed across the polished wood of the long table. "This isn't just about an ambassador," he declared. "It's the entire embassy, the whole machine, the entire shadow of control they've cast over us for generations. The United States has crossed a line, and they must know that Burkina Faso is not a pawn on their chessboard." The foreign minister looked up, his brow furrowed with worry. "Captain, this is unprecedented. We have never expelled an entire embassy. Washington's response will be swift. Are we prepared for the consequences?" Traoré rose slowly, walking around the table, his silhouette casting a long shadow over the official documents. "Prepared?" he said. "We have already paid with blood, 2,000 of our countrymen dead just last year, over 2 million displaced, camps full of children without schools, mothers without food. And yet, we are expected to stay silent when they equate us with terrorists?" He paused, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Minister, what punishment could possibly be worse than accepting that humiliation?" No one answered. The decision was final. The decree was signed mid-morning, with black ink and iron determination. By afternoon, the national television station interrupted its programming to broadcast the statement. "The government of Burkina Faso declares the Embassy of the United States of America persona non grata. Its personnel have 72 hours to leave the territory. The stars and stripes will no longer fly in the sky of Ouagadougou." The news spread like wildfire. Radios repeated it relentlessly. In the streets, crowds gathered in front of the embassy. Young people with banners, women chanting songs, elders with canes raised to the sky. As the U.S. Marines approached the flagpole to lower their flag, a murmur turned into a roar. "Sovereignty is not for sale. Sovereignty is not for sale." Some wept, others prayed, but there was no fear. What floated in the air was a mixture of defiance and relief. Finally, someone had said, "Enough." In the central plaza, a war veteran leaned on his crutch. He raised his voice above the noise. "They called us beggars for generations. Our captain has shown them we have no price. We didn't bury America, we buried arrogance." That night, from the presidential palace balcony, Traoré spoke to the country. His speech wasn't one of pointless confrontation, but of serene affirmation. "We are not expelling bricks, we are expelling an attitude," he said. "Aid without respect is slavery. Cooperation without dignity is a farce. We choose dignity, even if it means walking alone. We prefer the solitary truth to the accompanied lie." He paused, letting the silence speak for him, like a man who knows that words carry more weight when spoken with calm. "They will call us foolish," Traoré said. "But I ask you, is it foolish to defend the memory of those who die protecting our villages? Is it madness to want our children to inherit pride, not dependence?" At dawn on August 19th, a convoy of black vehicles left the diplomatic compound, escorted by the National Gendarmerie. Behind the tinted windows, the American diplomats watched in silence as the city bid them farewell, not with violence, but with quiet resolve. The embassy gates closed with a metallic clang that seemed to seal not just a building, but an entire era. In the council room, a minister broke the silence with a warning. We could lose more than $200 million in annual assistance. This puts our clinics, our schools, at risk. Traoré looked at him, his gaze unwavering. He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried the weight of lead. Then, let them close their checkbooks, because a school built on chains teaches slavery. A clinic funded with contempt doesn't heal. It only masks the wound. He continued, and what kind of education do we give our children if we teach them that bread with humiliation is better than hunger with pride? The council fell into an even deeper silence. Outside, the Sahel's dust rose with the wind. The last shadows of the diplomatic convoy faded into the distance. But on the rooftops, in the markets, in the fields, a phrase began to repeat with new force. Sovereignty is not for sale. The hours after the embassy's closure were like a held breath in the country's history. While international headlines spoke of a diplomatic rupture, the atmosphere inside the presidential palace remained dense. The price of dignity. The ministers reconvened in an extraordinary session, their faces grim. Some sweated despite the air-conditioned room. "Mr. President," the Minister of Education began, "we have already closed over 6,000 classrooms in rural areas due to insecurity. If American aid stops entirely, our educational system will collapse." Another, the Minister of Public Health, added, "Clinics are already reporting medicine shortages. Medical assistance relies heavily on international funds. Are we ready to watch our sick die for lack of antibiotics?" Traoré listened silently, waiting for everyone to speak. Only then did he stand, walking to the window that overlooked the dusty streets of Ouagadougou. He turned and spoke calmly. "Then we must ask ourselves a simple question. Is a school built on chains a real school? Is a clinic supported by contempt a true place of healing? Or are they just monuments to our dependence?" His words landed like a lead blanket. No one responded. But outside, the country also felt the weight of the change. In the markets, women started talking about rising prices. In hospitals, doctors worriedly counted medicine bottles. On local radio, heated debates erupted. Was it worth facing hunger for dignity? In a Sahel village, a journalist interviewed a farmer whose face was weathered by sun and loss. "Aren't you afraid there will be more hunger without aid?" The farmer wiped sweat from his brow. "Maybe we'll go hungry," he replied. "But it's better to be hungry with dignity than full and in chains. What good is bread if it forces you to bow your head?" Those words crossed the country like a firm whisper and found their way to Traoré's ears. The New World Order. That same evening, Traoré convened the military high command. The generals in the room were restless. "Captain," one of them said, "without Western logistical support, our troops will be at a disadvantage. How will we fight the jihadists without their equipment?" Traoré met his gaze steadily, his hands clasped behind his back. His voice was calm. "Don't you see? They give us rifles, but they chain our tongues. They give us medicine, but they poison our dignity. If Russia can offer us tools without humiliation, if China can build roads without sermons, why must we cling to those who despise us?" The echo of his words wasn't merely rhetorical. In Moscow, state channels celebrated the decision as an act of sovereignty. In Beijing, without major headlines, discreet delegations were dispatched with offers of cooperation. Turkey, from Ankara, promised to expand hospitals and aid missions. And in Bamako and Niamey, the governments of Mali and Niger reaffirmed their alliance with Burkina Faso. The alliance of Sahel states, AES, was taking firmer shape than ever before. But not everyone was convinced. In a private meeting, a young advisor dared to ask, "Captain, if this struggle leads to total isolation, if the children are left without schools, if the hospitals collapse, will we have done the right thing?" Traoré's response, for the first time, felt more intimate than solemn. "I have walked among the displaced. I have listened to mothers who have buried their children and fathers who no longer have land to plow. If we allow them to continue treating us as objects of pity, what legacy will we leave? A people fed but without pride, a country medicated but without a voice." He stood again, walking toward the map of the Sahel on the wall. "Every grain of this earth has been a witness to our tears," he said, "but now it will also be a witness to our decision. Let the hunger come if it must. A new kind of hunger. But it will not come alone," Traoré continued. It will come with the dignity of a people who have decided not to kneel again. The next day, on an unannounced visit, Traoré walked through a displaced persons camp. Children surrounded him. One boy, his clothes in tatters, took his hand. "Captain, will we have food tomorrow?" Traoré knelt, looked him in the eye, and responded softly, "We might not have much today, my son, but what we have is ours, and one day, when you grow up, you will know that freedom feeds the soul more than bread." Cameras captured the moment. That night, national television didn't show numbers, debates, or experts. It showed silence, a small hand and a firm one, and a phrase that echoed in every corner of the country: "Better hunger with dignity than bread in servitude." The news of the total expulsion of the U.S. Embassy didn't stay within Burkina Faso's borders. It traveled at the speed of satellites, crossing oceans and causing urgent meetings in distant capitals. Washington reacted first. At the State Department, a screen showed live images of the empty flagpole in Ouagadougou. An aide rushed in. "Mr. Secretary, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has expelled the entire embassy. It's not a simple dispute, it's a complete rupture." The secretary, without raising his voice, gave an order. "Draft a statement immediately. We will threaten to suspend all aid. If they want to isolate themselves, let them understand the price." That same night, American news networks repeated headlines like mantras. Burkina Faso risks international isolation. Analysts warned that more than $200 million in annual aid for health, food, and security could disappear overnight. But in Ouagadougou, Traoré did not take a single step back. Facing his cabinet, Traoré declared serenely, "Do they believe we will trade dignity for dollars? Let them call it suicide. But what life is worth living without honor?" In Paris, the alarm was immediate. French officials, who had already been forced to withdraw troops from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso in 2023, called the move reckless. One diplomat murmured to the press, "Traoré is cutting the last rope that ties him to Europe." In Brussels, communiques were more cautious. They spoke of worrying isolation and cooperation at risk. But in the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, the ministers read between the lines. Traoré turned to them, his tone firm. "Are we to be afraid? Afraid of losing the very chains we never asked for?" In Moscow, in contrast, seized the moment. On state channels, commentators applauded Traoré as a symbol of African courage. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov appeared before the media. "This isn't madness," he stated. "This is emancipation. Africa is showing that it will no longer kneel to neocolonial dictates. We applaud Burkina Faso." In a private meeting, an advisor cautiously asked, "Captain, the Russians are praising you openly. Should we move closer to them?" Traoré shook his head. His words were clear. "Let them talk if they want, but remember this. Dignity is not rented. We are not trading one master for another." Beijing adopted a different stance. Without any loud declarations or microphones, they sent emissaries to Ouagadougou. They offered humanitarian aid, technical cooperation, and soft loans. The message, delivered without cameras, was simple. We do not interfere, we only cooperate. Traoré considered the offer carefully, then commented to his ministers, "The West threatens. Russia applauds, China watches. Each is playing their own game, but we must hold the board steady." Ankara also reacted quickly. Turkey announced it was ready to expand its medical, educational, and infrastructure missions in the Sahel. An official spokesperson declared, "Burkina Faso is not alone. We stand firm as a bridge, a brother, and a partner in faith and development." Inside the presidential palace, Traoré listened to all these messages, tapping his fingers softly on the table, lost in thought. He finally murmured, "The world is debating whether we are brave or foolish. But I ask, is it madness to demand respect, or is it courage to walk away from dependence?" Meanwhile, in the streets of Ouagadougou, the demonstrations were growing. A banner held by students read, "Our sovereignty is our survival." In Washington, senators began to question whether a small nation could really defy the United States. How many others might follow this example? What would happen if Mali and Niger did the same? A palpable fear began to filter through halls that had assumed obedience for years. In Paris, editorials were somber. Some called Traoré a daredevil, playing with fire in a gunpowder keg called the Sahel. In Moscow, newspapers named him the Young Lion. In Beijing, there was talk of strategic patience. In Ankara, he was hailed as the new brother of the Ummah. Traoré gathered his council once more. "Listen to what they're saying," he said. "Some predict our collapse, others sing our praises, and others wait in silence. But none of them understand this. We did not act to please them. We are reclaiming our breath." He paused, looking at each of them. "Hasn't the time come for Africa to speak with its own voice, and not as an echo of others?" The room fell completely still. Beyond its walls, the country was finally breathing on its own. A new history, written in blood and sand. The ripples from August 18th had just begun to travel the globe, but inside the presidential palace, a firm certainty was taking root. They had broken the chains, and now the world was watching. In the council room, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before a map of the Sahel. The dust of the desert, whipped by the wind, rattled against the windows as if the continent itself were breathing hard. His ministers sat in silence, feeling they were on the cusp of something far bigger than themselves. "Tell me," Traoré asked in a deep voice, "who has written our story until now? Was it us, burying our children in the dust of the Sahel? Or was it men in suits sitting in offices in Washington or Geneva who never set foot in our villages?" The silence was heavy. Finally, a minister responded frankly, "It was always them, Captain. They wrote us as weak, as dependent, sometimes even as villains." Traoré nodded. He walked to the table where the U.S. report, still marked in red, lay. "Then listen to me well. From today, the ink is ours. We will not allow outsiders to decide if our soldiers are martyrs or murderers." Outside the palace, in Ouagadougou's central plaza, a new flag was raised. It wasn't the U.S. flag. It was that of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Green and red, it was a symbol of the union between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Since 2023, this military alliance had been growing, but now it was a symbol. Young people waved the banner while chanting. Elders touched it with their fingers, as if caressing the future. In stark contrast, the doors of the American embassy remained closed. The U.S. flag had been lowered in silence. In its place, the defiant and untamable Burkinabe flag, a banner that had not been taken down, now flew higher than ever before. A veteran observed the scene, leaning on his cane, and murmured in a hoarse voice, "A new narrative. For too long," the veteran murmured hoarsely, "they called us aid beggars. Now, we answer as the authors of our own dignity." In Washington, commentators spoke with disdain. "Traoré isn't just a rebel," one analyst said on television. "He's trying to control the narrative." In Ouagadougou, the captain addressed the cameras, his face severe, his resolve firm. "This is not simple diplomacy," he declared. "This is a battle for the African voice. For a decade, the West claimed the right to name us. Today, we take back that right." He paused, his eyes looking directly through the screen at his people. "When a soldier dies defending Kaya, they call him a criminal. When we rescue our daughters from extremists, they call their saviors abusers. Who gave them the authority to decide our truth?" Applause erupted in the room, but Traoré raised a hand to silence it. "Listen closely. This war is not just fought with bullets. It is fought with words. And words can wound more than knives. They label us as violators. They isolate us. But who writes about our sacrifice? Who narrates our graves dug with bare hands in villages where 2 million displaced people live?" His words traveled on the airwaves, repeated endlessly by local radios. In Bamako and Niamey, echoes were heard. In the streets, crowds waved the AES flag, shouting in unison, "No more borrowed voices!" In a strategic meeting, a counselor told Traoré, "Captain, the West controls the media. They shape global opinion." Traoré's response was sharp. "Then let them keep their cameras. We will use the voices of our people." The new dawn, a child singing in Kaya, speaks more truth than 1,000 headlines in Washington. African dignity is not a press release. It's a heartbeat. As he spoke, a mural was being painted in the heart of Ouagadougou on one of the city's most visible walls. An artist depicted the American flag being lowered, and beside it, the AES flag rising in triumph. Beneath the image, a phrase was painted, "Our history, our pen." Traoré visited the mural in silence with only a few guards. He observed it for a long time, then spoke almost to himself. "Isn't this the real fight? Not arms against arms, but voices against silence. Who will define us?" The artist, his brush still wet, looked at him. "Captain, Before, they told us our history began with slavery. Now, we tell them it begins with sovereignty. Night fell on Ouagadougou, but the city did not sleep. Banners waved with pride, and for the first time in decades, it was not the UN's blue flags or America's red, white, and blue that dominated the skyline. It was the green and red of an alliance that no longer asked for permission. From his balcony, Traoré looked at the two scenes, a closed embassy and a vibrant plaza, and murmured, "We are not burying ourselves. We are planting a flag that will outlive us all." The morning after the U.S. embassy gates were sealed, Ouagadougou awoke with questions hanging in the air. What would come next? In the markets, women audibly wondered about the price of rice. In clinics, doctors anxiously counted their meager medicine reserves. For years, the United States had channeled over $100 million annually into health, agriculture, and education projects. Now, it all hung by a thread. In the Council of Ministers, the debate was intense. One minister stood. "Without American support, our school programs could collapse. We've already lost thousands of classrooms. What will happen if the aid is extinguished completely?" Traoré's response was cold, deliberate. "Then we must ask ourselves if a school built on chains is a true school. Better to teach nothing today than to raise a generation willing to kneel tomorrow." His words were harsh, but outside the palace, in the deep Sahel, a farmer repeated the same ideas without ever hearing them. Interviewed by a local radio station, he said, "Maybe we'll go hungry, but it's better to die standing than to live fed by charity. We are poor, yes, but we are free." In Madrid, Barcelona, and Seville, many today wonder if dignity can sustain a nation amidst migratory tensions, growing inequalities, and global challenges. Could Spain also value its own voice more than imposed comfort? Could we one day have the courage to prioritize what is just over what is easy? In Ouagadougou, an elder raised his hand at a march and shouted, "Traoré gave us back our pride. Though the road is hard, we will walk it with him." The people responded as one echo. It was not just applause, it was a roar.